Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Three podcast. On today's episode, Torrey and I are joined by Bobby Reynolds as we discuss some of the changes in the men's game that are playing out in the opening rounds of the Australian Open. Bobby is the head coach of the Auburn University men's team. He also played on the ATP Tour and reached a career high of 61. Without further delay, enjoy the show.
I am seeing so many more former college players making their way into the top 50 and up, right? Former standout A&M, former standout over. I knew Brandon played at UVA, and obviously I knew Ben played at Florida. Those are guys because I know Brian since I was playing, right? So, but I didn't realize all of these players that had come through the college ranks. And you probably know a bunch of them from coaching against them for the last several years. Has men's college in particular, women's for that matter, Navarro and Peyton Starnes obviously are two more. Is college now coming back to being the true semi-pro, pro level, AAA, if you will, of pro tennis ATP that it always should have been, in my opinion? Yes or no, and why or why not?
Yeah, I think we continue to evolve to that place where I think everyone, as you mentioned, wants it to be, and it really should be. And this is not just a plug on any really college, right? But just the amount of resources, the amount of development, the amount of financial time, everything that can be invested in these kids from 18 to 22 to 23 years old, that they don't have to rely on their own resources. They don't have to rely on a federation year in, year out that we know some are better than others at supporting, and that uncertainty to help them bridge that gap for the uncertain times in their life, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of them that go straight from, again, throughout the history, straight from the junior, straight into, the pros and get to top 50 and top 20 like this. But the amount of other ones that have been left behind that tried to follow that path,
right?
I mean, there's graves everywhere of those type of guys, right? So now again, you can't even imagine how, like I said, how many resources that we pour into these guys. And if I broke it down financially per year, you would be blown away if you just think about private coaching, think about private strength and conditioning. You talk about private sports psychology. You talk about a private athletic trainer. And then you talk about any racket, string, travel, matches. I mean, it's just, we're talking, and I think from the American side, we've always kind of known that, right? And I think over the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's a lot more countries in particular that have also now continued to buy in. There's still some that are fighting it. But I think as a whole, you're seeing a lot more being like, all right, there's a lot of success in the pudding, right? Now,
Right.
Joan,
Right.
Many college guys, men's, women's, all the above, double, singles guys. Okay, why not?
Sure.
A lot less off our hands. And if we can send them to somebody that we know, or a couple different programs we know that are going to be successful and help them develop, okay, well, we can wait from 18 and now we can start picking them back up at 22, 23, 24 years old.
And you're getting a better product at the end.
And then now
100%.
you've got 10 years with them.
I've got a quick segue question. I have always thought the USTA should have a 20 and under division. Alvin and I talked about this when I'm having my usual, this would be a great idea. I feel like the 18s, in my opinion, is a great stage in development for the high school kid. But heck, let's face it, some of these kids are just now filling out their frame, let alone strong enough and physically ready enough to do anything else. In college, we've all seen the 22-year-old fifth-year senior playing against the freshman, that he thought he was ready until he played college tennis, and then he got his, people don't know this, and Alvin, I'll give this quick story for Bobby. It took Bobby almost 2 years to get 500 in the SEC. And I say that as I know him and I know his story and know how good he was. And Bobby was top 10 in the country, pretty good player last time I checked. And that just showed you not only how deep the SEC was, but also how much physically better. Vandy was no slouch of a school. Obviously, he had to get used to both the school load, being on his own, the tennis. And by the way, Vandy wasn't as strong as far as when he got there. And he was picking up the line one, which was nobody's picnic. And so now he's coming at this like, whoo. And he told me a few times, like, it just took me time to get my head around all of it and just where I got my legs under me. The next year, year three, of course, NCAA finals. Now, I say that to say that's a transition in itself, right? And I think that's something, one of the tests I have admired about you, Bob, was just you just kept working at it. And my question is 20 and under a legitimate next phase? To me, the 22 and 23s, these guys are full grown and they're not doing an internship at whatever Deloitte and whatever they're going to. They should be playing pro or going pro in their career, right? Is the 20 and under a pivotal area where you can see some of the kids in college play unto themselves, right? Not against the other 22-year-old, fourth and fifth year seniors. Is it a pivotal area of development? And would you, as a college coach, endorse an All-American for 20 and under?
Oh, I would. Again, and I don't know the exact statistics. What do they say? You start playing you play your best tennis at what, like 27, 28 years old, right? So I think as a coach, and even when we're recruiting right now, we're looking at 15, 14, and obviously sometimes committing players at 16 years old. It's mind-boggling to think that, their best tennis is still 12 years away and they've been playing tennis for 12 years,
Yeah.
So it's so hard to, again, hey, this guy, who was great in the 12s and the 14s, well, now he's in the 16s, you got to recruit him. Well, he might be already, hit that peak and started to make his way down,
100%.
And it's trying to find that, I think a couple things, right? I think it's work ethic at that point. I think it's, again, have they peaked or do they still have? Do they love the game, right? And from a college standpoint, there's, as you mentioned, there's so many things get thrown at you, right? You got the academics, you got the tennis, you got the social life, you got just everything. Boom, you're on your own. I think the more you can extend, and I have to give USTA a lot of credit. They're trying really, really hard to partner with college athletics, right? And do however, we can from a, obviously to help out the Americans, but also just college tennis in general, because there is so much success and you're starting to see so much success at the ATP and the WTA level. So yes, if there was some type of infrastructure or, hey, you know what, we're going to take all these guys from 20 and under and you're going to play, maybe a 6-week segment, and that's going to help you get wild cards or just something, to keep helping not only incentivize, right? As a coach, we're trying to balance. You get a lot of the top juniors coming out and they say, all I want to do is play pro, right? And that's great if you're getting matches, right? And then you look at the PTTs or the UTR PTTs, and I'm like, you get to go there, you get to go make money, and you get 6 matches, So it's kind of always that balance. So, to your question, as far as if USTA could help out and put something together, I do. I think it would be a great product to give Americans, hey, here's another avenue, whether it be in the fall, whether it be in the summer, around, kind of that spring season to get, you look at the rankings, you probably could get 24 to 64 players like this of unbelievable level of just Americans if you had that between, 20 and under type of age group.
And that's why I was bringing it up, because I feel like the Americans in particular don't get the matches from the 18s going into college. ITAs can be a little watered down. I think we all understand that. They're not what they used to be. And they're letting anybody and everybody play them, which is a whole nother talk show. The 18-year-old senior in high school who's a top national player, he's flirting with some pro tournaments, right? JoJo, right? He took a semester or a year off. I don't know how long he took, but took a year off to try to play, which again, you gotta do that. You've been wanting to do it for a while. You gotta do it to almost to soothe your own ego a little bit, to say, hey, I want to just try. Whether I make it or not, I want to find out. And Philip's a good family, and George was a great kid. So no shade on that. But clearly, he didn't make the draw for Australia, right? And you don't realize how hard that is. And especially so many players now in college tennis making that move and who made some headway afterwards, the pro tennis is just getting tougher. My thing is, the 18-year-old senior in high school is now in a really weird mountaintop, a peak, where he's only playing top juniors, and then he's playing up against pros. His UTR inflates because he's only playing up, or he's only playing guys that are also 12s and 13s like he is, maybe even an occasional 14. There's not enough matches against other guys like him. He inserts himself into college. He gets his teeth kicked in a little bit, which is to be expected. But if he were to play with a group of other kids like him, other freshmen, even a sophomore, and they would have their own mini circuit, I think the college level would be the better for it, because they're getting better quality players coming in the mix.
Well, I wanted to kind of ask a question about the. You mentioned that the USTA has been a big help lately. What type of help are they providing now, and how has their involvement kind of changed from your time playing in college, then kind of moving forward into you starting to run your own team? I guess there's probably 10 years in between those two, and then another 10 years since you've taken over the program at Auburn. How has their help evolved over the last, let's say, 25 years?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, I just think their partnership with college athletics in general. Obviously, there's a big push from the NCAA standpoint of having the championships down in Orlando and making an event kind of like in an Omaha, from the baseball side, and just kind of bringing more eyes and ears and just more in excitement into tennis in general, right? I think that's one of the big things. I think, I don't think there's as much of a barrier as far as going to college anymore, right? I do. I think back in the day, you had some, again, I speak about federations being like, well, if you go to college, you're going to, regress and get worse, and everything that happens at college and all the above. Whereas I think now they are truly seeing like, hey, there are some great programs, there are some great coaches, there are, a lot of success stories where you can go and you can still keep getting better. I think there's a more of a, again, holding hands as far as some of the federation coaches speaking to college coaches about the players, right? And hey, here's what they do well. Here's, where they're lacking. Here's what they might need. How can we really find a good home for some of these American players? And there's no, I think the competition is gone, right? I don't think it's my player versus your player. Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
He's with the federation. He's my player. I don't want to give him up anymore. He's my player. And I think just with USTA wildcards and just again trying to bridge that gap and really see that college is a great avenue for 98% of kids who play tennis. Right?
Does the USTA then view that as anyone who's playing tennis within the United States they're all treated the same, or are they still is there still a delineation between those who were born here in the States versus those who are coming from overseas or from South America, as it would be?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest I would say in this is this year, right, is and maybe this is a negative on the USTA side, is they took away the wild card for the NCAAs, right? And I think as college coaches and we voiced that concern going from a spring to a fall, and kind of that carrot and that kind of prestige of what has made playing college tennis and playing the individual singles and doubles so special.
Right.
No different than Kalamazoo, right? You knew what you were playing for. You knew what everything, the culmination was. If you're an American, you're trying to get that wild card, and that is massive. I do see their side, right? You have a winner that wins it in November. How are they going to be playing come, the next September, right? They might not even play number one on their team. They might not be top 50 in the country. So I do see that side of it too. And that's kind of something I think we got to get back to. Okay, how do we find this? And I think they've done at least preliminary a good job of, all right, you know what, come the summer, we're going to take the top Americans from college tennis and we're going to have a playoff that has the opportunity to win this wild card. So it's not like they've taken it back and said, okay, it's gone out of college tennis. So maybe finding that nice middle ground, between that. So I don't know if I answered all of your questions. I can't remember what everything.
No, that definitely did. No, TH, TH had a question that he wanted to get off. Yep.
This whole, and I always confuse the acronym NLI, I believe, NIL, excuse me, I think is what it is. Tell me how much it has changed. And as I know you have to, I know you're supporting, you got the Auburn University on your chest, so I know you can't divulge everything you feel on a personal level. Tell me what's good about it. Tell me some of the possible pitfalls and bidding wars and you name it that we're getting into if it goes unchecked.
I'll use one of your words that you've always used since I was, I don't know what, I mean, you started working with you, 10, 11 years old?
Yep.
Salty. Very salty.
Sure.
I'm salty.
Sure.
I just don't, if I look back at, hey, why did I get into college coaching? I got into college coaching because of everything that, TH, that you've done for me, that D. Drew's done for me, Dobbs. I mean, everybody who's ever had a hand in my success, that's why I got into college coaching, right? Is to be able to kind of give back some of anything that I have to give. And once we've moved to paying players any amount of money, that's gone out the window. And you hear about it from the football and the basketball standpoint. And I truly believe they have a leg to stand on, right? They're generating a lot of money for the university. There's a lot of other things that are going on that I do think that they deserve some of it. But if we just take the entire picture, and you're talking about college football players now, what did I hear? That Carson Beck is going to Miami for $4+ million, plus whatever he's going to get in revenue sharing next year. So $4 million is basically his signing bonus to go to Miami. Then he gets revenue sharing, and I've heard upwards of $10 million that he's going to make more money than what Brock Purdy did for going to a Super Bowl. I mean,
right.
We've lost our mind as far as college athletics, and even from a football standpoint, some of those coaches are making more per year than the NFL coaches.
NFL coaches with better contracts and longevity.
Professional coach making less money than a college coach.
Right.
So there has to be some checks and balances. And I think this is really it's a crazy time. And again, I'm 9 years in. I'm going on my 9th year, and I talk to coaches who have been around in college tennis for, 20, 30, 40 years, right? And their minds are blowing. And I'm even further off, and I've only been in such a short time. I really just think the pendulum has swung so far right now that, NCAA is just, you know what? You put up a lawsuit, okay, we'll back down, and that's why that pendulum has swung. So we needed to come back in some...
Coming back, right.
Whether it's, through Congress, whether it's through, the litigation side, whether it's just through change, and you asked about, obviously, college tennis, not college football or basketball. There's numbers out there that are 6 digits for 1 year, for one spring.
Yeah, I've heard.
If you go and do the math of men's tennis, if you go and do the math of a guy who's probably top 200, 150 in the world right now, they're not net profiting 6 figures. They're just not.
Yeah. And
it is just, it's not even that it's unfair from a playing standpoint and from a competition standpoint. It's unfair of what we are presenting to 18 to 22-year-old kids that is not reality.
It's a false sense of reality, 100%.
Whether you go and play professional tennis or you go into the working world, who's going to give you a 6-figure deal to come work for 4 bucks
to work?
Right.
With no success, with no results, with really nothing.
So with all that kind of being, I guess, fairly new in the last 2-3 years for you, like, how has your role as a coach changed or evolved in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last 2 years, right, it's not, I don't want to say I don't, what keeps me up at night isn't as much forehands and backhands and serves and how are we going to make the culture. It's like, okay, how are we going to go out and fundraise? How are we going to go out and truly compete with, and again, it's not specific schools that, oh my gosh, obviously, the Texas, the brand and obviously having their own network and that's just going to generate more money. But you have some of these one-off schools now that just really have a donor that has a vested interest in men's tennis and
Sure.
it has a blank checkbook that just says, hey, coach, whatever you need, you just let me know and you make it happen, right? So if you're at a university that doesn't have that blank checkbook,
Right. Or said donor.
there's that donor, right?
Right.
Or you don't have some of
Right.
the other intangible things that I think over the last 40 years has been attractive to college men's tennis, right? You're already behind the bar pretty far, and you're looking up and you're like, all right, well, those 10, 12 schools have this, those 10, 12 schools have this. Okay, now we're fighting between, 20 and 40 with all of the rest of us who are kind of, competing under the same pretense type of thing.
Right. It's going to be a crazy time. To your point, I hope for your sake and other coaches like you that the pendulum swings back because you'd like to think it was about coaching at the end of the day. I like to think that it's coaching at the highest level. I like to think that it's coaching all the way through. And this little aberration, I'm going to call it, it's a little tough right now. It's tough for me to see. Thank you for the kind words. You were one of the absolute best players I coached and one of my most favorite. My story. There was a player, and I won't call the other player out. He was also one of my favorites at that time, probably the best player I had worked with. We're at the sporting club, Alvin, at Windy Hill. And some would say that I was a little tough on the conditioning court back in the day. And we were doing 3-court suicides. 3-court suicides. It was the end. They were getting ready for Southerns. Back in those days, we didn't have the luxury of the, long breaks and the wet bulb, dry or whatever, wet bulb, dry globe test hadn't come in yet. It was straight up old school. And I had these 3 players doing conditioning at the end of practice. 3 of our best, by the way, and all these guys are top in the country. Bobby Reynolds starts off in true tortoise and hare fashion, just slow and steady, but would not give up. We are on probably the 4th 3-court suicide, right? The player, and this other player was probably the best athlete I had worked with up to that point in time. Speed out of the wazoo, graceful when he did it. He hit a wall, Alvin. He hit a wall. And just in his mind, he could not make himself finish this one particular exercise. Bobby Reynolds says to me, 4th 3-court suicide. This is not after drip. This is not fresh, not, he just has an extra, he's doing blood doping in the corner. He's dying. And he yells this. I'm going to get him. I'm just going to outwork him. TH. And I was laughing because he saw the moment. And that was his time to catch this player who, up this point, he was still trying to catch. He may not have known it then, Alvin, but that mantra was in the making. He went on to be obviously a top college player, went on to be a top pro, and obviously a top college coach. And I say it to say, I saw that on some random day in the summer at, what are you, Bobby, 17? You had to be 16, 17 years old. And I remember thinking to myself, his medal was forged in some of those sessions, but each time that happens, you get more and more, your belief, right, grows. To me, people say, oh, success breeds success. Well, I agree with that to a point. Before you have success, you have to believe. You have to have a mini win that allows you to have some success in a bigger win. Those mini wins, and you remember all the times at Old School Chattahoochee Plantation, Bobby, and all the stuff we were doing. There were days I was making up exercises to give you guys to do, from plyos to stuff with bungees, stuff that Tennis World was catching up to now. We were doing back, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was almost, Bobby would come to the gym and say, GH, what you got for me today? Like, he was almost looking forward to the torture. He knew it was going to be tough, but he was looking forward to what was he going to get pushed to today. And those are things that I look back on as a coach. I look forward to those days. I look forward to, oh, this is going to be good. Here, Bobby, I got something for you today.
And
Anyway.
that's a good segue to my next question, like kind of the, between the collective experience that you guys have, like not only, Bobby, your time on tour, the time you spent playing at a high level in college, and then Torrey, your, the experience that you have with junior players, the role of the coach, how does the role of the coach change as we move from, let's say, good junior to top junior to college player to pro? And I'll let Bobby kick it off there.
Oh man. When I look back again as I spoke about all the people that have helped me along the way, I really think maybe it changes, but it doesn't really change. And it's knowing the people or the person that you're working with and what makes them tick and how am I going to motivate them to be better that day. And, I know you can't see this on this podcast right now, but there was no chance between age 13 and 18 or 19, and probably still to this day, that I would look at TH and tell him no for anything. So that was never an option, right? He told you you're going to go run and you're going to do it this many times. You're like, yep. Right. I'm going to go do this. Right. And that's again, that's what is so great about being a coach and being a mentor. Right. And he knew, right, he's not going to do anything and put us in any harmful way and detriment, but he's often also not going to go soft on us, because at the end of the day, he's doing wrong by us if he doesn't push, right? If you don't push him, if you don't help them along. And I think that's the biggest thing, again, as I try to go, get guys from juniors and then obviously work with them for 3 or 4 years and hopefully help them out as they go on. It's finding what makes each guy tick, right? And when they fall short, how do you, pick them up? How do you continue to motivate them? How do you make sure they understand the big picture, right? And I think that's what I've felt as a coach, and there's no two people that are the same.
Yeah.
And so how do you manage that across a team of, 8 to 10 guys?
I mean, I'll tell you, that's is far extreme as I've had people, when they fall short or they, fall short of expectations. I've had guys go out and paint equestrian rails so that they are seen by their peers at the equestrian, on the equestrian side, the women's, of something that they fell short. I've had guys, clean the indoor tennis courts. I've had guys do conditioning early in the morning. I've had sit down with guys. I've had, it's just, I feel like you have to find, I mean, we're managing 9, 10 different guys, and what I could make one guy run for an hour and a half straight and it wouldn't serve its purpose. And I could make him sit in my office and just tell him how upset and how he's let his team down and how he's let his parents down. And that has a far greater effect on him than making him run for an hour and a half. And that's the bad side of things, but the same thing on the motivational side of okay, how am I going to make you a better tennis player? Right. And it's just, I feel like it is drastically different depending on who you have. And you ask me specifically with each player, then I could say, okay, I do this for the player A and player B and player C. But I can only imagine from the junior side and, of how many guys, again, you're working with so many more players that come across your court day in, day out and trying to figure out how to get the most out of them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Gives you the most fulfillment at the end, right? Is everything invested in them, in the hard times, the great times, the bad times, and then seeing where they end up in the end.
Tell you that it's easier than you think, because while you look at a lot of numbers, there was only a few kids and those numbers that tried as hard, wanted it as much, and really kind of dialed in to the frequency you were putting out. You two were 2 great examples of that. I remember talking to Alvin. I forget what tournament it was, Alvin. It had to be, I want to say it was Pelham. for some reason. We were at a tournament in Pelham, at some rando tournament. And you and me talked for the better part of an hour and a half and watching some matches. May have been Travis playing, and you asked me, you were probably 15, 16 at the time, and you had asked me 6 of probably the best questions. I'm like, Alvin, you think a lot out there, don't you? I said, maybe you think a little too much, but
I was just getting you ready. I was getting you ready for this podcast, actually. Just 25 years ahead of time.
Exactly. And I remember looking at you differently after that tournament. Shoemaker would always tell me Alvin, and I'm like, okay, all right. But I hadn't really had a lot of experience with you. And after that point in time, I said, you know what? I like that, Alvin and Wusu. We now had, I now saw you as a kid who wasn't just bashing the ball. You were thinking your way through it. You had an issue or two, like everybody. And I'm like, huh. And I then want to help a kid like that more. Why do I get into coaching? I want to help. I want to help a kid get better. I love the coaches that help me get better. I look back at some of those times that were hugely important to me. I want to be that for that person. I had a little bit of salt at Bobby brought my word back. I had a little bit of salt at my college coach because I felt like I tried so hard to get to that level, only to get to college level, and the coaching I thought was atrocious. I'll be honest. I thought like I didn't learn much. I went out. I was here and quick little backstory. I went and played summer league basketball. I played basketball and tennis, but more basketball than tennis. And there was a few coaches at summer league, at Old School Sports Life, Bob. You remember Old School? You both remember way over there in Cobb. And a couple of coaches gave me a couple of pointers, watched a couple of games, a couple of players. I was like, I've learned more in this 2 weeks at this summer pro league deal than I've learned in 2 years at Morehouse. And I was pissed because I'm like, it didn't take a lot. So I did 2 summers. At first summer, I came back, I was playing ball. And the coaches were like, oh, looks like somebody's improved over the summer. And I was like, yeah, no thanks to you. And in my mind, I was so pissed because I'm like, guys, I'm not wanting, back in there, I'm playing D2 basketball. I know I'm not going pro, but I do want to be better. And so I left Morehouse and obviously even Georgia State. And I said to myself, I'm going to be the coach that I wished I had. I'm going to take an interest in those kids. Who knows what these kids are going to do? And if I can't go pro in sports, maybe I could go pro as a coach. Maybe one of my kids I coach can go pro. And I'll kind of experience it that way. And that will kind of, that'd be enough for me. And that's kind of where I was. But I say it to say, you were both those kind of players. You gave back what I thought I was putting in. I remember one day, Bobby, it was some rando day, 12, 13. Remember the front courts at UTA, old school UTA? You were playing some match with somebody. And I remember I had gone to McDonald's, I was eating lunch, and you had gotten fired up with some big point. I rolled my window down because I heard the screaming. Of course, it was Bobby playing on court 1, hooping and hollering around on some big point. I was eating my lunch, watching. I moved my car over to where I could watch while I'm eating lunch. And I was like, I always love it when Reynolds is here. It's always, he's always fiery. He's going to compete. And I remember getting out of my car, like hyped to do drills. Like, oh, it's going to be a good day. B-race here. Oh, it's going to be Monday today. And it was one of those things where I always look forward to those days when you were in drills because of the attitude, the energy you brought. So it was hard not to. If anything, I'm like, man, how dare me not be ready, not be up for drills? You know what I mean? And so it starts having this kind of two-way thing, right? Where you're coming out to give it, I'm coming out to give it. We're both going to kind of feed off each other's energy. There were 20 other kids out there. Sometimes I can't even tell you names. You know what I mean? There were moments I remember when both of you were on my court. And I remember moments with, my point is, so it's not the masses per se. There's 60 kids out there in drill, that's great. But really, it was those 10, it was those 8, it was maybe those 12 that you really bonded with and had that relationship with. And then to your point, and then you learn kind of what motivates them, right? And at 8 to 10, a little different because every kid at that age kind of wants to be competitive, wants to be the champ on the wave, right? And at 12 to 14, Okay, what kids really wanting to actually change and learn? 14 through 16, are they going through that time frame where they still want to work, or is school pulling one way, or parents doing? Then you got to kind of navigate and mitigate some things like that. 16 to 18 is obviously at that point, it's really more just, did you do the work 8 years ago or 4 years ago to make it happen now? But I would tell you that Dauber made a point one time, Bobby, you'll appreciate this. It takes a good player to make a good coach great. And it takes a good coach for a player, it takes a good coach to make a good player great. And I thought it was, I forget the exact wording of it, but bottom line, one couldn't be one without the other. And I think that symbiotic relationship is really important. And I would tell you that I've been blessed to have you two and on the other side of my net for whatever those years were. And now that we're on the same side of the net, so to speak, it's been even better. That I really cherish. I've asked you as many questions, Bobby, as you've asked me. You know what I mean? Post your time at the drills back at UTA, and it's been a neat exchange. You know what I mean? I remember the days with Brian Haley, and obviously with you, and it's just been neat to see those times and see that the progress you guys continue to make. Obviously, both you guys as fathers and as men, and in your career. So it's been pretty cool to see those relationships formed from when a kid who just dared to try enough to let a coach take notice of them, and at that point, that built that was a found. That's all we needed. You know what I mean? You tried, you cared enough, right, to try and to improve. I showed up. I chose to come here today to look for a kid like you to give that kind of energy back. And buddy, I'll be darned if I'm not going to reciprocate. You know what I mean? And maybe more than you want today. But I'm going to bring it. And if you're going to bring it again tomorrow, I'll be here tomorrow. I'll be waiting on you. And I just feel like when I get kids like that, man, so and I've had the good fortune of having kids like you guys come across me. And as I say, it's you guys we're men now. You know what I mean? But it's such a neat thing to see. And there's a lot of power in that word coach. There's a lot of short of father and other a few other titles. I remember my main man, Bobby. I'm having an older moment. My main Stanford coach, Goldie. I remember Paul told me that one time. Was like he made it, and he said it in such a Goldstein savvy Stanford way. He was like, probably the second best thing you could ever call someone as coach, after dad or and I was like, you know what? I'd never thought of it that way, but in a lot of ways, a lot of us are, and Alvin, you've coached a good bit as well. You really appreciate that reference power you have in that position you are in a lot of kids' lives. So anyway, without the diatribe going too long, I thank both of you, you know what I mean, for all that and what's going on. I do have one last question for you, Bobby.
I was going to say one follow up to you. You were talking about me hooting and hollering. I was going to say it must have been like a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. I definitely had the Tuesday, Thursday no talk days implemented by you coaches. So it definitely could not have been that.
Oh my God. So little kids, I'm going to take you back. My first recollection, Alvin, of watching Bobby Reynolds. I'm walking in old school sports life. I'm on a far court. I'm working there, taking care of the courts. I got a membership there so I can hit tennis balls, and I'm going back and forth to Morehouse. And so I'm gonna have to pay. They let me get a job there, and that was my little part-time job. There were these two. I think one was 9, one was 10. I'm talking to the moms up there, and I'm like, who are these two guys here? And I thought it was funny because their names are kind of the same. And I'm seeing Robbie and Bobby and these two little boys down there, and they're playing. Somehow the state doubles tournament rained out. They got them indoor courts over here. And these two kids are, tiny, pumping their fist. Just running around the court. Who knew that Robbie Ginepri and Bobby Reynolds were, at this young of an age? And I happened to buy them. I'm like, kids aren't too bad for some little guys. And volleying. Neps was down low at the net. Crouching down. Yelling switch, and of course they're lobbing. Of course they're hitting, lobs and drop shots. And then, you, and not one ball went past 20 miles an hour. You know what I mean? But they thought they had the armbands on. Had the head backwards. These two are just balling for 10. And I laughed at it. 8 years later, I'm actually getting into coaching after all of my condition days. And I'm like, Drew pissed me off and told me he didn't think I was going to do this now with coaching. I was like, I'm going to show you. Sure enough, then Drew leaves me with Bobby playing Robbie in the finals of Southerns. And it now came back around full circle. And then even past that, one of the pictures in my background, Bobby and Scope played doubles together and took a set off the number ones at the world that day, York, against my main man. Who was it? Was it who the Swedish guy, my main man, great returns.
It wasn't Mirny. Who did we play?
It was Mirny and Bjorkman. You
And
got
Bjorkman,
Mirny and Bjorkman. And Bobby, I remember that match goes yesterday. Alvin, they beat him in a tie break and were just balling. I mean, just playing some ball. The second and third set we won't talk about, but let's just say let's just say that Mirny got a little pissed off. And I remember Bjorkman hit a couple of returns, and I was like,
in that space between Robbie and Bobby at age 9 and 10, all the way to the Mirny and Bjorkman days, there was a lot of, because I'm only a year younger than Bobby, so like
right.
as a player, kind of in the shadows of these two guys who are at the top of the section, and then
right.
at the top of the nation, like there were a lot of like random Robbie and Bobby instances that would just kind of pop up, and one of them was actually happened at my high school, and this was like a very, very funny, weird. It would never happen in high school tennis, but Bobby, I don't know if you remember this. Like there was a high school invitational at McEachern High School, and you were at Harrison, and I was at McEachern, and Robbie was at Wheeler, and Wheeler was supposed to play Harrison, I think on a like Friday night or something like that. And so, like, what are the chances that you got, I'm 16 at the time, so you guys are probably 17. So, like, you got two of the best players in the country playing against each other in a high school tennis match, right? An invitational tournament, no less. But the kicker was Robbie wasn't in town. He was at a tournament. So they were supposed to play on ours. This is at my high school. We have two sets of courts, right? We have the 6 lighted courts, and then we have the 4 courts that are like the just the courts over there with no lights on them. So I and Bobby, I always wanted to know how this happened or how this was agreed upon. Somehow Wheeler versus Harrison got put on the courts with no lights at like 6 o'clock in like the fall. It's like who let this happen? And it's like Robbie's not here, so obviously they're not gonna get this match in. And then it gets pushed back to the next day. And it's like, okay, Saturday morning, there are people everywhere to come watch a high school tennis match in West Cobb. So, Bobby, I don't even know if this even like, if you remember this right over your head. Okay, this is what, yeah, it was.
I do remember, but did I play you in something at McEachern? Yeah, I remember playing.
Maybe.
I cannot remember, but I don't
yeah,
remember.
It could have happened. Whatever it was probably pretty quick. But yeah, I do remember that match getting like pushed to the next day, and then like magically both of you guys showed up and like, oh, we got a tennis match here. But
well, did I end up playing Robbie in that? Because I think we both only played maybe 1 year of high school tennis.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think you guys ended up playing that match. I think.
Well, then it was probably another win for him, because you know how many wins I have over him. Listen, so you know what? That's why I don't remember any of them, because I am a goose egg versus however many versus.
That's funny.
Yeah, join the long line of us. There was one other question I did have for you, and we'll let you get out of here. But since this came up in another episode that we had talking about how college tennis has become so valuable as a gateway to the pro tour, right? And I can't remember if it was Torrey or if another one of our guests mentioned that part of the special sauce is that the quality of coaching has gotten better. And so you've been involved in college tennis for, as a player and as a coach for like almost 20 years now. Is that true? And if so, what else can you attribute to like the shift? I would say that major shift from a coaching standpoint.
Oh, if I can say that the college coaching has technically gotten better. What I think I can definitely say is the college coaching as a coach now is more year-round. I think you had some great coaches even back in our era that were coaching at some great schools. But I just think when you talk about what the role is of a college coach, it's no longer just, from January to May, and then we'll see you later type of thing.
Right.
I really think you have some again, it's more of, as I spoke about earlier, we're not just selling a lie. What we ultimately would love to happen is that if I have 9 or 10 guys, that they are using Auburn as their home base, right? Obviously, they have their home where they are, but you're here for the fall, you're here for the spring, and then during the summer, right, when we don't have any rules and when we can help you out and everything's still covered, you're coming back and we're having that constant communication as far as, okay, you're going out to play these 2 futures or you're going out to play these tournaments, but you're coming back to us for the week and a half, 2 weeks of training in between the next one, right? And you're coming back and you're seeing our, sports psychologists, you're seeing our nutritionists, you're seeing our athletic trainer, you're seeing our sports strength and conditioning coach, right? You're coming back to see your team. Whereas I think if I rewind back 20 years ago, right, when we were done with the fall, again, I loved my coach, Coach Flack. I mean, one of the greatest guys, but it was like, I didn't hear from him and he didn't hear from me. We had no cell phones. We had no communication from the time practice ended until I showed up, for the first day of class. And then we would go from the first day of class to the end of the season, and it would be like, all right, I'll see you next year, and you would kind of go back to your home coach. And so I just think the infrastructure of what we're able to provide, along with, again, you have a lot of coaches that have a passion to coach, right? As we talked about earlier, to mentor, you're not just building the relationship so you can spend the better part of, let's say, really our season, if you really break it down, is about 6 months. Like, we're not 6 months on, 6 months off, right? We're truly on 12 months. And how can we help you? How can we make you better? And I think that is what's making college tennis players, that come into the system that much better when they end up leaving. But
Gotcha.
like I said, I mean, if I think about coaches that have recruited me that are still in the college game to this day, they're great coaches now, and they were great coaches then. It just really has evolved, And the funny thing is, and I'll give this kind of as an example. I had Lester Cook with me last year, who had come on and wanted to really get into college coaching, had done some real estate, had dabbled in a bunch of stuff, been successful, and said, you know what, I really think I still have a empty spot in who I am to get into college coaching because of the coaches that have helped me. Sure. And within the first 3 or 4 weeks, 6 weeks, we're sitting in my office and he goes, oh my gosh, like, I didn't realize this is how much work you guys actually do on a day-to-day basis from 7:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. And he goes, and that's not even taking into consideration the recruiting that you then do at the nighttime. He goes, as a student athlete, I just don't think you truly understand the spectrum of what college coaching is going through, right? From an administrative standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, to budget, to then what are we going to do in practice and individuals and just everything. And I really think when you take a step from being a student athlete, and we have one right now who was a great guy, and he's my second assistant now. Same thing. He comes in and he's like, oh my God. Like, it's nonstop.
So what does a typical day look like then? Now I'm curious, like, what does 7:30 to 6 p.m. look like in your world?
I mean, really, when we're in the spring or we're in the heat of it, you're doing individuals from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock every single day. You have, and this is at least our schedule, and then you have about, 10 o'clock to about 1 o'clock as far as administrative recruiting, anything you need to do from that standpoint. And then about 1 o'clock, we start practice at 1:30. We go 1:30 to 3:30. 4 to 5 is conditioning or lifting, right? And then you're kind of tying up loose ends at the end, getting out of there by 5:30, 6, depending on what's really keeping you. And then, you're scheduling, recruiting calls, right? You're trying to keep up with the guys that you're recruiting, and right. It's only getting longer, right? Now that we can recruit 2 years in advance, it's not just, that short window as we know it from senior summer until November for the signing period. We're really talking to kids from their summer after their sophomore year.
Wow. Okay.
So again, I see some great points to that, and I see some negative points to that. But the great part is obviously you're building that player coach relationship that
earlier,
and ultimately what we're trying to do. But the negative side of it is what the player feels that they have to commit so early, and oh my gosh, I have this pressure, and it has to be right now. I just started talking to coaches in June and July of my sophomore junior year, and I want to commit by October. And you're like, whoa, how could you possibly know everything that you could need to know, and or where a program is going to be in another year and a half to 2 years, and or where your progress is going to be in another 2 years. So like I think we've lost, in at least in that time period when I speak about recruiting, is the getting to know, like, of like, hey, I'm not going to commit in still my senior year, but now I've gotten to know, 10 schools with 10 different coaches and 10 different programs, and I'm a year later and I'm a year more mature, in the whole process. But yeah, it really is nonstop. I think if I say we have a little bit of downtime, we got a little bit of downtime, right after Orange Bowl, into the holiday season. But like I said, I mean, our guys were back a week before even school started, because they want to come back. They want to train. They want to get back into the system. They're not like, okay, how long can I stay at home and just kind of relax on the couch? You have a lot more, again, full circle. You have a lot more guys that want to play professional tennis and truly want to play that, and they value what they're getting, so that they are willing to invest and come early and take advantage of what they have presented to them.
Nice. Well said. That's well said. I've got a question and a favor, and I'm going to ask the favor first, and the question will be for next time if the answer is yes. The favor is, would you come on again? We'd love to have you again. The question, this is a loaded one. Our good friend and my former player is now the head of the USTA. You are, hypothetically speaking, head of the NCAA. We're going to say you're at the request of the athletic directors at all. You are going to speak for the men's college coaching symposium, and you, along with Brian and others in their responsible positions, are going to craft out the ideal schedule, wild cards, tournaments, you name it, for the integration of the NCAA and the USTA. The question is, for next time, what does it look like?
Man.
So that's for next time.
Okay.
It's a big one.
Give me some time to prepare then.
Give you some time to prepare. And most importantly, I'm looking for why. What don't we have now, right? It's easy to say, well, there's one of that. You're going to have to there's some give and take in there. I want you to think about it. It's a weird one, but I think there's nobody more prescient than you to think about it and to speak to it. There's no better relationship you have, obviously, with your former big brother, you know what I mean, on the court than Brian. And who knows? It might just be a conversation we have with him one day. So it's something that I bring to your attention. I know there's some earthquakes and some tremors going on with the USTA right now and all that. I think it would be wise for a coach like you to have, at least in mind, what it should include, let alone what it should look like. And perhaps just in my own, how do we look down this road in 5 years? What does it look like to make it better, to make it be even more complete, and as opposed to just pot shotting what we need is and this and that's wrong. So that's my favor and my question. That we have some time to think on it, and I would be very, very curious to know your answers again and your reasons why. And we'll look forward to having you on the next time.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I would love to do that, and I think you've obviously been with Brian a long time. I think he's a great ambassador and person to be heading up the USTA, right?
100%. Couldn't be a better person for it, in my opinion. I just wish his term were longer to actually get some things done, as I do with all of them.
Yep.
I love Katrina when she was there as well, a good friend of Katrina Adams. I just feel like the way it's set up is a little bit tough because you're only there for like a whirlwind. It's really 12 months. They say it's 18, but it's really only 12 months. Before you know it, you're gone. You know what I mean? It's like it's just difficult to get any kind of thing done. So I'm curious to see what he chooses to have as priorities and what he chooses to try to initiate in that short period of time. I'm glad that he's giving back and wants to be involved. Brian and I, we used to have some knockdown dragouts about the USTA, this and that and the third. And so to me, to see him get involved, I was really happy to see, because it's one thing to have something to say about it, nothing to have an attitude about it, nothing to get to roll up your sleeves and get involved and make some change from the inside. So whatever it is, I'm sure, and he's a sharp guy, I'm sure he's already thought that through. But I bring that up to you to say, envision it as if Haley himself is across the table from you, who also was a former top college standout, NCAA finalist and such, top junior, also from Atlanta. So that would be a fun conversation to see. Also 50 in the world. You guys have a lot of similarities. So what? And then
as long as it's not an argument, because I've never won an argument against it. He is that big brother.
Brian. He's gonna. Shut up, Reynolds.
Shut up, Reynolds.
So what I said to say, if it were to ever come up, I think it would be good for you not only to be prepared, but also to truly think about where the game's going. You're in it right now. You know what I mean? So, and Brian didn't do a lot of this on that college side of things. It went on into whatever he's doing, wealth management, hedge funds, and all that other sort of thing with his double major. I'm just mentioning it. I think it'd be a great question. I'd love to hear the answer, regardless whoever hears the solution, besides our listeners on this podcast, because I think you're at a point now, Bobby, where going into year 10, and I know you had many years as an assistant as well. You've seen several different schools. You played band. You're at Auburn. You were at Oklahoma. And probably a few schools that I've forgotten about that you were at. You have seen it. You've seen SEC. You've seen you've seen Big 12. You've seen, I guess OU's technically part of SEC now, but all that changed. Back then, it was, we know it was Big 12. I think, heck, when I was coming, it was Big 8. You know what I mean? So it just shows you how long it was back in the day. But you've seen this. You've seen the other coaches. You know it. At some point, not just the money issue and Title IX. There's a lot of things going on. What would it look like, and what comprehensive things would we do, and why? And that's so. Yeah, we'll talk to it next time. And I, for one, I know I speak for Alvin. We really appreciate having you on, and we can't wait to get you on again. And good luck good luck, War Eagle, right? And good luck to the Auburn Tigers this year. And look forward to seeing how your team does this year. And we'll be checking things on, and be watching some Australian. We'll be asking you a lot what you thought about some of the matches and how things kind of shook out at the end of the draw when we talk again.
And I think we'll put a pin in it there. Bobby, thanks for joining us. TH, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
We'll be back at this again next time.